Good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning into the 50th episode of Mark's Mouthpiece. I'm super excited tonight to have on the great Sean Jones. And before I get to talking to Sean, I want to thank my sponsors, Euclid IQ, which is the world's leader in audio and video compression, and also guard bags. So this is my guard bag. I know that Sean's into guard bags. And what you'll find in my case this week is the new Vincent Chickowitz fundamental studies for the developing trumpet player, and Sean is one of the generous endorsees inside that book, and you can see that at halleonard.com. And also like to mention that Sean is also going to be one of the guest artists for the World Trumpet Society digital seminar, which is June 24th through the 27th. The fees are super low, $25 for students, $35 for non-students. And you'll get to see a ton of great people. Just go to worldtrumpetsociety.com and you will see that online. But enough about all that. Sean, pleasure to see you.
Pleasure to see you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. And Sean, I've heard you playing for many years. I always liked it, like immediately, like in every way, musically, like trumpet-wise. There's so much to get into with that. And I wonder if we could talk a little bit about you growing up in Warren, Ohio. How did you come to the trumpet?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you again for having me, man. This is really fantastic. The number 50 is an interesting number for me. I just turned 43 years old, so 7 more years.
It's 2 more starting next week.
2 more. Hey, man. You know, once you turn 49, you're just 49 for the rest of your life.
I hope so.
Well, that's I'm glad you brought that up, man, because growing up in Warren, Ohio, specifically Northeast Ohio, it was a true blessing and sort of a curse of riches in some respects, especially growing up the way I grew up. I grew up again in the Still Valley, Northeast Ohio. Mostly everyone was middle class. Okay, what we mean by middle class is you go to work 5 days a week, you clock in and you clock out at some type of factory job, whether it be General Motors, whatever. Now, because of that upbringing, my folks kind of just, my mom specifically, dad wasn't around, kind of left me to my own auspices. Okay, and I was a curious kid. So I really dug the music that was in the church that I was listening to. And that was largely improvised. It was largely pentatonic types of music, a lot of blues, but there was a whole lot of different things in there, rich harmonies, and I had no idea what any of that stuff was. But I grew up having to sing it. And I think that largely that informed my playing more than anything, because I never once separated the voice from the instrument when I started playing it. Now, move ahead to when I discovered the trumpet. That was 5th grade. Like everybody, most other people, they rolled a bunch of instruments in, flutes, clarinets, saxophones, all of that, and they demonstrated them. And nobody messed with that trumpet, man. And when I picked it up, I realized why it was hard. So it literally took me a month to get a sound, man.
Really?
Yeah, it took me a month to get a decent sound on the horn, like where I could actually play hot cross buns or something like that.
Wow.
And that's actually what I fell in love with. I fell in love with the challenge of the instrument. You know, I almost kind of considered myself an alchemist in a weird way, like some kind of weird Inspector Gadget. Like if I could figure this thing out and keep figuring it out, then that'll just be fun.
Yeah.
Know that it was going to turn into a career until later on in high school, when I realized that that's literally all I wanted to do when I woke up in the morning and when I went to bed at night. Now, couple that with the varying influences that I had growing up in Northeast Ohio. from orchestral players. Isoto Pellegrini, he's been talked about with the International Trumpet Guild a lot of the time. Fantastic player. He was my first. Actually, no, he was my third teacher. My first teacher was Sue Sexton, and
Okay.
yeah, which is brilliant trumpet player from Northeast Ohio. But Isoto Pellegrini was kind of the cat that made me realize what was possible with the instrument.
Right.
You know, he pulled out the Armand's book and he said, "Play that." And I'm like, "I can't play that." And he said, "This is how it goes." And I would try to figure it out. So he basically taught me just by example.
Right.
And then he put CDs in front of me, like Wynton Marsalis's Carnival of Venice. Excuse me, the album he did with Eastman.
Oh yeah, Carnival. Yeah.
Carnival, yeah. Wynton's Carnival album and his Standard Time album. He gave me both of them at the same time, and he said, "You can do this if you wanted to."
Yeah.
And that's when it kind of just went for me, you know. So that's sort of my early career, man, and it was a true blessing there because I wasn't able to be distracted by all the hype. Like people were honest with me about how I played. If I did a good job, they're like, "Good job." They didn't overhype it. And then when I sounded sad, they were like, "No, that's not happening."
Wow.
So it was very honest upbringing, man, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah. And we'll get into Winton for sure. I mean, actually, one of the early questions I had was where you were at Winton at this time. I think anybody our age.
It's a long story, man. How I got to know him.
Oh yeah, no, we're gonna get into that. We're gonna get into that for sure. I think anybody our age would immediately list Winton and those records in particular, and also think of one. Like if I was gonna say the earliest
Right.
things I heard him play were the Carnival and then the think of one in Standard Time. I mean, those were and still are amazing, amazing recordings. Um, and you also had a band director, I think, that turned you on to Miles too, right?
That's right, Jessica Turner. That was the sixth grade.
So you were listening to Miles in sixth grade.
Sixth grade, specifically two albums, Kind of Blue
Mm-hmm.
and Tutu. She gave me those two albums. Kind of Blue she had on a CD. Tutu, I think it was a tape.
Mm-hmm.
If
Mm-hmm.
I can't, but it might have been a CD. But I do remember the one out. Actually, you know, it's funny because the Tutu album was the one that really like struck a chord with me.
Wow.
But it was another one actually that really hit home for me, and that was Miles Davis of Mandla, which Marcus Miller produced right after the Tutu album.
Right.
And man, I literally put those three records on loop, and I just tried my best to sound like them and
Right.
understand them. And it actually kind of, I don't want to say cursed, but it like blessed me and cursed me at the same time because I never listened to music the same way.
Yeah.
Like I started listening in such depth that I would hear people that were off. I would hear things even that early on. I'm like, nah, that's not
Right.
happening.
Right.
You
Right.
know. And with my untrained theoretical ear, untrained theory, you know, but I knew what I heard.
Right.
It just kind of sent me down this rabbit hole of discovery, and it was really fantastic. So Jessica Turner is responsible for a lot of this, y'all.
Wow. Well, thanks to her, we're glad that that happened. Were you? When did you start transcribing?
I started learning solos before I started quote unquote transcribing them.
Right.
And the first one I ever learned was Freddie Hubbard's solo on hubtones.
That's a
That
big one.
sounds crazy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's monstrous solo, and it's like that fast. Beep, 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 beep. I can still play it to this day. It took me three and a half months to learn it. But well, let me circle back. 3.5 months to learn it, and the reason I wanted to learn it was because of the intervals. Now, most young students wouldn't hear those intervals and immediately want to play them. Again, I was one of those kids that just the more difficult the instrument was, the more I liked it. And so at that time, I was 16 years old, and I was listening to a lot of stuff. I literally would just whatever was there, I would grab it and peep it out. So that one really hit home to me. And I fortunately had the technique to be able to do this thing.
Yeah.
to be able to play it. Now that shows you what type of teacher Isoto Pellegrini was. I was 16 years old and I could actually play the hub tone solo. That's because when I was 14, 15, when I first started studying with him, he literally sent me down a rabbit hole. Like it wasn't like, oh, well, you got to do this first. And you know, he wasn't babying me at all. He knew I was ignorant enough to not realize how hard it was.
That's
And
great.
so, yeah,
That's
that's great
great.
teaching.
Yeah.
Great teaching. And so that's what he did, man. You know, page 144. He said, learn these arpeggios. When I could play them, he said, all right, go to page 140. You know, go to the next one. Do that. All right, now play it faster. Okay. And I just started doing it. He's like, all right, next. And then the next thing I know, I'm playing all the characteristic studies by the age of 17 in the Armin's book.
I mean,
Not even realizing that it was something extraordinary.
yeah. Yeah.
I just thought it was like, oh, this is what you do. You know,
What was your practice schedule like in high school?
all day, like literally all day. I would wake up in the morning. That was the first thing I did. And that's how I developed my routine, right?
Yeah.
It was a series of listening to players that were older than me, listening to Pelly, and eventually another brilliant trumpet player, Chris Crummell. He was my teacher in undergrad.
Yeah.
Brilliant trumpet player, man. A lot of people don't talk about him, but he's bad. He's a bad cat.
Yeah.
So he studied with Ray Sasaki. So
Yeah.
he showed me a lot of race stuff. But I would wake up in the morning and try to do stuff that they told me about. They would tell me, have your fundamentals together, fundamentals. So I developed what I called my maintenance or fundamentals, or now I call it the pedagogical routine, right?
Right.
So that was long tones, scales, arpeggios, articulation, slurs, you name it, whatever it takes. You know, I actually considered it like I started to think about it like it was a car. You know what I mean? And like you got to put gas in the car, you got to put oil in the car, you got to get it clean, you got to do it. To me, that's what scales, arpeggios, long tones, all of that stuff was. So
Well,
I never wanted my car to be in the shop. So I did it every day, bro. And then after that, I started to get more, you know, you give me A2s and things like that. So I would do that after that. And
right.
then I called that routine the reinforcement routine.
Right.
That reinforces the pedagogy. And then at night, I would just play whatever I wanted to play. I wanted to be a jazz musician primarily, but even though I like all music, so I spent a lot of time at night either playing gigs, sitting in with people, or learning solos.
Right.
So that turned into my routine. I still use. It's 3-tiered, 3 times a day. This time, and that time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's skip ahead to that then, and we'll come back to some of the other things in your career a little later. Can you talk about what's in your routine right now? Like, what's your prescription?
The prescription for me is just what I just said. It's the same thing, man. I wake up and first thing I do is pull out the mouthpiece.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Fielder. Well, I know we'll get to Prof in a minute.
Yep.
But he got this advice from Vincent Chikowitz. And Chikowitz said that you got to play a dozen different tones, not too high, not too low on the mouthpiece, get a good mouthpiece buzz. So I do that without any air in the sound, right? This is a mouthpiece I don't even play on. All right. It just happens to be sitting here. My mouthpiece is in the case. So your mouthpiece sound could sound like this. You hear that?
Yeah.
That's got some air in it. Or it could sound like this. Right? So the difference is all of the air is being used to vibrate.
Right.
Nothing's being wasted. So when air is being wasted and you hear the air, that means it's not being used, which means that you're likely going to have to start using pressure to get a sound that you want.
Yeah.
So I start my day off with that. Dozen different tones on the mouthpiece, not too high, not too low. Then I do a series of breath attacks in the lower register, just to get the response happening, the air to the response. Yeah. Then I'll either do the Chikowitz flow studies, which you just saw, that magnificent book, y'all, which is a fantastic book. They did a great job.
Appreciate that.
Mike did a fantastic job. So so we have that book. I do those flow studies, or I'll do the long tones in the spider sequence,
Right.
starting on F concert, going down all the way to E, up to F sharp. Speaking concert pitch. I'll do that, alternate. After that, I put fingers to the flow, and so that would be Clark studies. And there's a wonderful Clark rotation that you can find on the internet. Clark 3-day rotation. I
Yeah.
like to do that. Yeah, that's a very hip one. That's Clark 2, 3, 4, and 7, and all 12 keys in 3 days. I like to do it at a quarter note equals between 90 and 100. Okay, all of them.
But yeah, before you move on with that, I remember a video you put up maybe last year. Like play Part 4 in E with the repeat at 92.
That's right.
I spent a long time since I felt so inadequate.
Well, it takes a while. People think they look at that. That's one of the most deceptive exercises in the canon.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
As you put that on, people say, "Oh, this is just some scale shit. Like that's all I got to do."
Yeah.
No. The idea is to maintain your flow over a long period of time without sacrificing the pitch, the tone quality, or your strength, right? Stability.
Yeah.
And so it's very difficult to do. Very difficult.
E and F are deceptively difficult too.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. So after I put my fingers to the flow, then I'll add slurs. I call them tongue slurs because I believe that the tongue makes the slur happen, not your lips. So I don't like calling them lip slurs. Sorry, Scott Belk. I love your book, but I wish you would call them tongue slurs. What's that?
He had to change his license plate.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, well, it's working for him, so maybe I should be quiet. Yeah, so after I do a series of slurs, then I get into scales and arpeggios. Then I do multiple tonguing. Yes, I'm primarily a jazz musician, but I practice multiple tonguing as much as possible. And I isolate the syllables. I isolate the tu, the ku. I actually call it ku, like Q-U-E, ku, like the French would say it. Then I do it backwards, then forward. Yeah. And in essence, that's the end of my pedagogical routine. And I believe in it. I stick to it every day. It works for me. I think everybody should find their thing that works for them. Some maybe play less, some maybe play it more or do variances. But I do believe that you have to start with the flow, and then you add all of the other offices of the pedagogy. The stability of the corners, flexibility of the lips, the fingers, the flow, pressure, all of that stuff.
And before we go into what you do next, I was going to ask: is there anything that you put in that routine, and you just described it all pretty clearly, so that you already probably answered the question. But is there anything that you do in your playing anywhere out the day that you think people would be surprised that you feel like you need to take care of? Because I think sometimes we listen to great players, we think, oh man, that guy's got everything under control. He probably didn't have to worry about that. But the truth of the matter is, everybody's got something they gotta.
Man, for me, it's long tones.
Yeah,
I think that long tones and flow studies and those things like that are the most slept on part of pedagogy. I think people after a while just don't want to do it. They're like, oh, this is boring. This is like, well, to consider it a meditative practice. Meditation is not boring at all. It requires focus.
Yeah.
So I'm actually in those times trying to meditate, man.
Do you use drones or sing when you do any of those kind of things?
I don't know. No, I typically don't do it because I don't want for me, I don't want any other sound happening other than my sound. Gotcha. Because I want to be reflective on that sound and I want to have an intimate relationship with that sound so that when that sound is just ever so slightly off,
yeah,
I can adjust it. But there are those that use drones and things like that. One of my favorite examples is how Ingrid Jensen uses the drone in her practicing. So If it works for you, great.
Is there anybody that sets up your sound model before you play?
Man, a few cats. There are two players, and I think people will probably be shocked when I say this, but there are two trumpet players that I literally view them as the gold standard of sound. Number one, Phil Smith. Number two, Hakan Hardenberger.
I don't think anybody's going to be shocked by that.
Well, they're like, oh, jazzer. This jazz, I hate that word, by the way, jazzer.
But
But
but we've talked before about this, and it's like music's music, man. I mean,
exactly.
you got to play the trumpet.
That's right. That's right. You hit the nail on the head. And that's how I view it. I want to be able to play it all. But when I start, I want to have a steely blue sound that's almost like a placid lake. And to me, I mean, really, Phil Smith, that's like, man, I remember the first time I heard him and I was like, if there was a Gabriel in human form, that's the cat. Like, that's the cat.
That's right.
That sound is,
Yeah.
ooh,
Yeah.
ridiculous.
So what do you do? What's the next session? How do you set that next session up?
The next session is literally the reinforcement of that, and I always take at least an hour break between those.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next session will be some type of etude or orchestral exercise or something like that, or classical solo repertoire. The reason that I use classical solo repertoire to reinforce the pedagogical routine is because the pedagogy is encoded in that music. You got a few hundred years of of trumpet pedagogy written in to that genre. So I try to use that genre to reinforce the how to play the instrument.
Well, I think people would be surprised. I mean, you were going to play the Zimmerman except for the pandemic happening, right?
That's right. Yeah. I was ready to go.
You can play it on C trumpet?
Yeah, I was going to play it on C. I play all the trumpets. I play C, D, E flat, pick, A trumpet. I mean, A is, that's just a matter of, doing a little bit of manipulation. but it's cool. I play all the instruments. I love playing the trumpet. Yeah, I absolutely love it. And once or twice a year, I force myself to do something that is outside of what I typically do. And that's actually advice that Doc Severson gave me several years ago. He said, man, you want to stay on it. Don't play the same stuff all the time. Do something that'll jar you every now and then. And that's why I decided, when I was approached by I think it was was it not San Francisco? Was it Oakland or no, somewhere in the Bay, one of those orchestras approached me to do that with my good friend, Conductor Young. I was going to do that. I'd said, all right, let me do it. Just give me about 9 months and I'll have it together.
Now, what etude books do you find on your stand more often than not?
Charlier is on there all the time. Biche is on there all the time. The Boo Tree is another one that I really like. That's hard. That's really hard. Mm-hmm. I like the Bousquet for the low register. I like there's an interesting book that's called The Novelty Cornetist. Do you hip to that?
I don't know this book.
It's an interesting book. It's a lot of extended techniques.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting book. Apparently Pops studied out of it a little bit before he died. Really? The Novelty Cornetist. Went and told me about that book. But those are pretty much the ones. The top tones etudes are really good. And I also like to play solo repertoire. Go back to that and pull it out and just remind myself that I'm not nearly as good as I thought I was. And I still like to take lessons, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like to get different views on how cats are doing things. I love talking to Brad Good every now and then. In fact, it's time for me to talk to him again, man. Yeah. Brad has an interesting perspective on playing. So so you have to be a forever student with this instrument. If you're not, you're done.
Actors have coaches their whole lives, right? So why should we stop, right? You know.
That's right.
So talking about Brad, I mean, Brad, and maybe could you mention maybe a couple other people that have had something that's fairly recently been like, oh, I should think about that.
Brad Good, Scott with it, with the way he approaches Scott Belt, with
Yeah.
the way he approaches slurs.
Hmm.
Rashawn Ross, like his approach to the upper register. I always go back to Faddis because Faddis is, first of all, he's like a big brother to me.
Yeah.
Second of all, he is a true student of the instrument.
Hmm.
And a lot of people, they may think that Faddis is, he's a little rough cat, but he's like the sweetest guy in the world, and he'll give you everything he has if he can to help you, and he's always been that way for me.
What did he teach you about the upper register?
Faddis,
Yeah.
basically, it's about, for him, control and the slotting.
Yeah.
One of the things that he talks about is that people think it's about chops, and he says no. Like he unequivocally doesn't believe it's about chops. He believes that yes, you need to have a certain level of strength, but it's also knowledge and knowing where those slots are. Um, so he'll one of the exercises that he showed me was doing the triads, just really softly, all the way up as high as you can. And if they stop speaking, you don't force them.
Yeah.
You just try to find again, finding the slots on that. For me, the upper register is like, I don't like thinking of upper register. I like thinking of the entire spectrum of the instrument, almost like I'm playing piano,
Right.
because I like the solo that way.
Yeah.
I get jealous of piano players when they're up here and they come all the way down and bam, and then go all the way back up. I want to do that too. So I literally, for what I did was I started taking all of my exercises and expanding them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's expanding the Clarks, a good way to do it is take that spider routine
Hmm.
and just do the Clarks in the same spider routine.
Yeah.
You know, so that works pretty well for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did Rashawn give you with the upper register?
Rashawn,
Yeah.
never, honestly, we never had a real discussion about it.
Okay. You're just talking about his approach, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about just from watching him.
Oh, just from watching him. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't talked to him much about. I need to, but Rashawn is so humble. Like
That's,
he's one of the most humble trumpet players I've ever met.
yeah.
So it'll all like it might even be awkward to talk to him about this. I'm sure he'll share it, but maybe like 30 minutes in, 30 minutes it'll take him to be like, oh man, that, get out of here.
Right. 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 And what about Brad? I mean, you mentioned him. I mean, Brad's a very efficient trumpet player, the way he approaches.
Very, yeah, very efficient. He was actually one of my first teachers as well.
Yeah.
And so what my understanding of, and please understand, this is my understanding of their approach. Okay. Maybe they will come back and say, actually, no, that's not what I'm talking about. But that's my understanding. And my understanding of what Brad is that he believes that the modern trumpet is too big. It's designed for large orchestral works and things like that. So he plays smaller equipment now. Okay. Medium to small bore horns, smaller mouthpieces. And he believes that we should all if we're going to play solos primarily, that's what it's for. And those big, gigantic, they're not considered big, gigantic anymore, but like a Bach 72 bell or something like that. Those are designed to be played in orchestra settings, big sound, big full out thing. But, to play a 4-hour gig on those horns is pretty taxing. I mean, I've been doing it my whole life. Now that I'm 43, I'm like, ooh. It makes me think about efficiency a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what do you do practice day?
I'm sorry, what was that question?
What do you do the rest of your practice day?
That's all music. That's all, whatever I'm working on at that particular moment in time. Whatever I want for people that are developing is whatever you want to be the arm of or the foundation of your career to be. So for me, I wanted the foundation of my career to be jazz informed music.
Right.
I like playing in an acoustic jazz setting, and I like improvising. I enjoy that. That's what makes me happy. So I spent a lot of time figuring out how to do that as high a level as I possibly could so that I could get paid well doing it. So, and that goes for any genre,
Yeah.
you know. Am I going to be the first call player to play in an orchestra? No. Am I going to be the first call player to play in a funk band? Probably not. But I can play those gigs if required to play them.
Right.
But that's not what I wanted to focus on. Do I think that if I took a year or 2 or 3 off, I could go and sit in a tier 2 orchestra? I could probably sit in, but I still probably would be higher. Or would I be able to play in the hottest funk band out there? Or probably not. But I can do those things if called.
Yeah.
And that's the level of respect that I have for genres of music, though, and
Right.
styles. Like I have an utmost extreme respect for it.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah. I think trumpet players are like that because we all know at the end of the day, you still gotta tame the beast, right? I mean, it's
That's
not.
right.
Yeah, one music's not easier than the other. It's just different, but the playing's the same.
Yeah, most serious trumpet players do not have egos. Most serious.
Right.
Keyword most. Most and serious go together. We all get along. We know it's just hard.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
hard to do this. And we're in 2021. There are a lot of devices out there that can pretend to get the job done that we've been doing our entire lives, pretend to get the job done, but you cannot replace a trumpet. You can't do it. Okay. And so that means that we have to stay on our game and we have to support one another.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Well, speaking of how you learn things, can you talk about how you learned tunes when you were young, and is that the same as you would do it now? What's your process with that? Or if you were to give advice to your 14 or 15-year-old self about how to learn tunes, what would you do?
I wouldn't change anything, honestly. The way I learned them is I put on the records, memorized the melodies. I dove deeply into the tunes. I got varying versions of the tunes, learned the chords. I guess if there was one thing I would do differently, I shouldn't say there was nothing I wouldn't do differently, is get more serious about the piano earlier on and harmony.
Yeah.
I think that all musicians need to have a greater awareness of harmony. It just opens up your hearing. Just because you're not writing music doesn't mean you don't need to know harmony. Okay. It's very important. So the more I hear and the more I can hear those inner parts, I can learn the scores, like the Artunian. I guarantee you that probably 99% of the people that know the Artunian have no idea what's in that orchestral score. None. you know. So for me, it's like I grab the score, I look at it, I listen to all the parts around, and it was really cool. The little bit of time that I got to actually hang with Hakan Hartenberger is very brief. I got a chance to see one of his scores that he was working on.
Yeah.
And it's all like there's like highlighters. It's like written. He's got stuff all like he's an intense studier and student of the entire piece, not just the notes we have to play.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would recommend to younger players that are getting into this. Study harmony, study the whole spectrum of your musicianship, not just the mechanics of playing the instrument.
So speaking of studying, so if you're going to try, well, this is sort of a two-part question. So when you do a transcription, what are the details and what are the subtleties you look for in a transcription? And then when you're going to do a deep dive into a player, what is the deep dive into that player like?
Man, that's a great question. That's a really great question. So a specific transcription, obviously the notes. You got to get the notes. After the notes, the sound. Try to match their sound, like play with the record all the time. Number 3, it got to be memorized. Don't just try to write it out. All right. Number 4, I don't believe in slowing them down. If you have to slow a transcription down, then you can't hear it.
Okay.
Okay. Play something at the tempo that you can hear.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to constantly be dumbing down the music to suit your needs. So, if you can't hear it at the tempo that it's at, then you're not ready for it. Okay. And that doesn't mean that you hear it right away. That doesn't mean that. That means maybe maybe a few weeks in, you're like, man, I can't play this. I'm not hearing it. Then you need to take a scale back. But if it's like this tempo or something like this, you're like, I can kind of hear it. Just keep going after it. Keep chasing it. And you got to be honest with yourself, in order to do that. Other parts of learning, just transcribing, is learning the other parts. Okay. If it's in a jazz ensemble, learn what the soloist is interacting with.
Yeah.
What's the drummer doing? What's the pianist doing? What's the bass player doing? Guitarist, whatever that is. Also, if it's a orchestral piece, what is the orchestra doing? What's happening here? What's the tempo? What are general tempos of the piece? So those things. And then after that, you go out and try it. You play it with people.
Yeah.
Now, if you're diving specifically into an individual, you got to know their complete discography. You got to know where they're from. What instruments did they play on? Mm-hmm. Who did they perform with? And what year did they come into prominence? Okay. Yeah. So you can't know Clifford Brown without knowing the early 50s in jazz. You can't know Clifford Brown without knowing that he's from Delaware, Wilmington specifically. You can't know Clifford Brown without knowing that he died tragically in a car accident driving to a gig in Chicago on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. You can't know Clifford Brown unless you knew he played on the small bore instrument, right? You can't know Clifford Brown unless you knew that his wife's name was LaRue, all right? And he left her a pile of money. He saved everything he had, left them in good shape. Wow. He was that kind of cat. So you hear, that's why he sounds so clean. That's why he sounds so joyous. You can't know Freddie Hubbard without knowing he was a character. You can't know Freddie Hubbard without knowing that he was from Indianapolis. You can't know Freddie Hubbard unless you knew that he was really tied to David Baker and Wes Montgomery. You can't know Freddie Hubbard without knowing that he was on CTI Records, Creed Taylor Enterprises. You can't know Freddie Hubbard without knowing that he was on David Letterman's show, one of the great acts in early David Letterman. Can't know him without knowing that he lost his chops. That kind of stuff.
Yeah. Right. I mean, the same applies to any genre. I think anybody that's really serious is going to know all those things. I mean,
that's right.
You don't have to major in mathematics to be like Clifford Brown, though, right?
No.
Okay.
No. And I like that. So I like what you just did there. You're like, I know Clifford Brown. But that's telling you're a student of the music.
Yeah.
And that's why we get along so well. That's why we're cool. You know what I mean? It's a respect that goes beyond your typical day-to-day humdrum humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad we don't have to do math very well, because I had an algebra. This is not related, so if people don't want to hear this part of the interview, it's not. I had an algebra teacher that yelled at me one day in class. She said, "You're going to go into music. You got to be good at math." I said, "I only have to count to 3."
Yeah, pretty much.
I didn't go over so well at the time, but
she didn't understand anything that you were just saying at all.
You certainly didn't hear anything I had to say after that.
Yeah. That's deep that you said it, because everything is a variation of 3 or 2, or a coupling of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there was so you just brought up David Baker, and the way you describe studying a transcription reminds me of how he taught that. Mm-hmm. Did you ever go into those books that he did when he would?
I went to Jamie Aebersold's camp when I was in 10th grade, and I was in the David Baker ensemble.
There you go.
Guess who else was in that group?
Please tell me.
Justin Kaiser, Ryan Kaiser's brother.
Yeah. He could play.
He could play his ass off, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those cats, they were deep.
Well, I heard a tape of Ryan and his brother when I was in high school, and I thought, yeah, this probably isn't the way I should go.
Well, Ryan's a kind of a freak, man.
Yeah.
Like, he's one of the greatest, if not, I don't want to say the greatest, but he's one of the greatest trumpet players I've ever had the chance to hear, let alone sit next to.
Yeah.
I mean, this cat could play anything, man. He just toss it off.
Yeah.
Just toss it off.
Man. So did you pick up some of that from David about looking at transcriptions like that?
I picked all of it up from him.
Yeah.
All of it. He's the cat that told me how to transcribe.
Yeah.
David.
Amazing teacher, man. I mean,
I was very fortunate to know him.
yeah. Yeah. Same. Yeah.
Mm.
So now kind of getting back into now, were you over 18 or under 18 when you read Miles's autobiography?
I was 17. 17 years old.
You almost needed to have an ID to buy that book, I think.
Almost, but you know, I mean, you're 17, you still trying all that shit. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you got a little girlfriend in high schools sneaking behind the stands. You know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, it's, especially now. I mean, now kids know everything. You know, early.
That's true.
You know,
I don't know if that book's on electronic or not, but yeah.
I'm not sure, but I mean, you know, it's an interesting book. There's a lot of seedy stuff in there, but there are a lot of gems in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, a lot of gems about his life.
Yeah.
Specifically about, you know, when he got cracked over the head. You know, this is Miles Davis. Like at that time that he got beat over the head, he was one of the most known musicians in the United States.
Yeah.
And then wham, you know.
Definitely one of the more accurate scenes in the Don Cheadle movie, right?
Yeah. Well, one.
Right. Well,
yeah.
One. But
that wasn't meant to be a historical
thing.
You know, I talked to Vincent about that. You know, Vince Wilbur is his nephew.
Yeah.
And it wasn't intended, you know, everybody, sometimes we get a little too heady with our music, man. And most people don't care about that. They don't care about the stuff that we care about. We have to care about it because we uphold the standard.
Right.
But that's the genius of Dizzy Gillespie, man. Dizzy Gillespie, so down to earth, but so up in the sky at the same time. And we need more of that in the music, man, especially what we call high art, you know?
Yeah.
Like we need more of that levity in it. We get a little too serious sometimes. And you know, rightfully so. This is very difficult.
Yeah.
But if we want to expand it and expand the joy of it, we just have to be like these great chefs out there. You know, they're not walking around talking about how great they are that they made this plate for you. They're like, nah, eat this.
That's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Well, this kind of reminds me of another thing I want to talk about. So after you graduated from school and you played a little bit on a cruise ship, came back, you taught elementary school. Am I right about that? Or
I did, man. I did.
Well, so talk about first of all, how that happened, and then what did you learn from that?
Well, it happened because the cruise line went bankrupt. And I don't even want to get too deep into that, but I will say this, like, your road is not straight. It's just not like, okay, I decided that I want to do this and I'm going to start and boom. Nah, there's like detours along the way. There are pitfalls. Sometimes you got to go in reverse. That's what it is. You screw up, you know, or you take gigs that aren't so good. So anyway, this cruise line went bankrupt and I find myself back at home and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? Because I'm not going to get a regular job. Yeah. I tried to get a regular job and I quit after 2 weeks. I'm like, this is not me.
Yeah.
So I started teaching general music in an elementary school in East Cleveland. It taught me patience. It taught me the purity of the human spirit. You know, because those kids would come. One, I'll never forget this little girl, man. She came up to me at the end of the school year and she said, Daddy, don't leave me. Now, unless, you know, there's something that I don't remember that happened after one random gig, that was not her father. You know, not her biological father.
Yeah.
And so she said this to me, man, and I'm like, gosh, like it just, made me think, man, and it really made me start thinking about education and the
Mhm.
purity of education. I always wanted to be a teacher, but I didn't realize until those moments that literally one thing that you say could either make or break a person.
Yeah.
And so I started to get real serious about what it meant to be a teacher. And I decided that I was going to devote at least 50% of my time and my life on earth for the rest of my life to teaching. Now, fast forward to where I am now, I find myself that it's the greatest joy of my life to be an educator, man. And
Yeah.
I've played on the stage with a lot of cats, man, in a lot of cool places. But if I had to choose which one it would be from here on out, it would be teaching. It would be. And that's hard. It used to be hard for me to say that, or even, but now it just falls out. Like, I know what I'm designed to do at this point for the rest of my life. But that does not mean that I'm going to stop playing, because I'm one of those people that believe that you got to, not just talk the talk, you got to walk that walk too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going to come back to the education thing toward the end. But so after you, and how long did you do that? How long were you teaching the general music?
I did it for a year and a half.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Short time. And then I met Derek Gardner.
Right.
And through Derek Gardner, he he introduced me to Bill Fielder.
Right.
I sent Bill Fielder a tape, and that was it.
And so speaking of Professor Fielder,
Oh! Look at him. Surprises.
What's up, brothers?
Melvin Jones.
It's gonna be nothing but comedy now, man. I see
Oh,
nothing but
snap.
comedy.
What's up, man?
I had to bring Melvin in here to talk about you guys' time together at Rutgers.
Oh, man, it was beautiful, man.
Yeah.
Melvin, I was telling him how I used to practice in front of the TV all the time, man. But it was
Right.
really magnificent. It was, it was interesting because there were three of us that were trumpet players.
Yeah.
Right. There was Lee Hogan's, who's played with Maceo Parker, Prince. He's
Yeah.
played with so many
P.
cats.
Diddy when he was Diddy.
Yeah. P. Diddy. Play with everybody. You got Melvin Jones, who's played with everybody. He's like playing scores on films and all of this stuff now, man.
It's crazy, bro.
And then me, the weirdo. So, but we would walk around and we influenced each other so much, man. We would put cups up. I remember putting cups up to the wall to try to hear what they were practicing.
Yeah.
We were playing bands together. We were a horn section together. I'm sorry, man. You just opened up a can of worms. You brought my brother over here.
It's about to get silly, man.
That's the idea.
Yeah, I'd have stolen a lot of things from him and Lee. Those are the days. Stealing a lot of licks, man. This pretty much changed my life. So these cats, man, those are my brothers for life. So it's always good to see, somebody get their flowers while they're here.
Could you guys talk about Fielder a little bit? What were his lessons like?
No.
That ain't it, man. That ain't it. That ain't it. That's not the sound. Take me to the grocery store.
Yeah, it was a lot of hazing, man.
Oh, yeah.
But the beautiful thing about Prof was he was abundantly focused on one thing, one aspect of the instrument.
Exactly.
And that was air and wind, like wind specifically, and how you use that wind to create sound.
And I'll be honest, like a lot of stuff the Prof showed us, that the way he showed us heavily influenced how I teach even to this day. Because I feel like a lot of times I think when you give people exceptions, to whatever rules you create, you give them a crutch to not become what they could be. And that's one thing that I took from Prof, man. There were no crutches when you're dealing with this cat. You got him somebody who's legally blind in one and actually blind in the other eye, that he will use every other sense to tell you that what you're doing is not the way it should be done. And he was strict with it. He was like, if that's not it, then I don't want to hear anything else. Yeah. And so I think that's important now. And Sean hit on something the other day on one of his posts. It was like, when it comes to mentoring and teaching, you need to reach the students that need to be taught. a lot of us go into this situation, especially in our younger years, not realizing how much we don't know. Beautiful thing about Prof is he made it clear that you know nothing.
No,
Oh, that ain't it, man. That ain't it.
Oh man, boy, I tell you. You know what else about Prof? He was extremely genuine and generous with his time.
Yes, truth.
Man, we were with him all the time.
All the time. You know, in class, out of class, on weekends. We pick the cat up, he'd call us, and even then, he would drop these nuggets on us here and there, give us these cassette tapes. And he was always trying to slide them to us on the side as if we didn't know that everybody else could see him handing us a cassette tape. Whatever the case, man, the cat he was given the kind of knowledge that I wish was available earlier on in my lifetime. And you know, he's made it. I think everybody that went through that school, because just like any other private school, everybody can't get in and everybody can't get out. Prof was a private school in itself. You know, that was a finishing school of trumpet, if nothing else. And it wasn't for everybody. You know, there's a personality that comes with strictness that everyone can't deal with. You got to have some thick skin to deal with a cat who's telling you to put the trumpet down and go into, like, you know, agriculture. So, you know, but that's who he was, man.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, and that actually influenced me and my teaching style a lot, because I think oftentimes we think that 1 hour time slot for a student is like, okay, here's your lesson. It's at 10 a.m. and it's to 11 a.m. and you better come prepared. And then when it's over, it's over. Prof broke all of those rules, literally. All of them. First of all, it might not have started at 10. It might have started at 10:45. In the first 45 minutes, you might be out on the bridge talking to him while he smokes a cigarette.
Yep.
You know, and then you got to take him home. You know, hang out with him. He came over our place a couple times.
Yep.
You have to take him to Red Lobster, buy him all this fried food.
Bennigan's.
Bennigan's, yeah.
Love Bennigan's.
Yeah, and so it was like, it was a true mentorship situation, man. He wasn't just, it's so ironic that his name is Prof, because he was way more than a professor.
Yeah.
That cat was a mentor, like for real, in the purest sense of it.
And man.
And what did he say to you guys once your career started moving? I'm sure you guys kept in touch and were
yeah, often satisfied, or gratified, never satisfied.
Yep. His whole thing was never satisfied, only gratified, always move onward and upward. So he would check in, and you know, when we graduated, his health started to really decline. But you know, every now and then he's like, all right, okay, you're doing all right, good. But he also would hook us up. Like, I met Illinois Jaquette through him. I think we all
Me too. Yeah, he sent us all through that.
Yeah, he would recommend us for gigs and say, oh, you know, go there. I remember meeting Donald Byrd.
I remember meeting Freddie. Remember we met Freddie Hubbard over in at the Iridium one night. Took us out to hang out with the cat after the gig.
Yeah.
He was how I met Winton, actually, back in the day when we were in school.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he was a gem, bro. They don't make them like that.
True mentor.
Yeah.
What did he say about Winton? Because, I mean, anybody that's had a student like that, you know, they've had a student like that, so they're going to bring him up.
What did he say about Winton?
Yeah, what was it?
Prof said that Winton actually had no idea what he was doing earlier on, like in high school. He was actually trying to play the
it was the Haydn and the Hummel.
He was trying to play both of those. Yeah, he's trying to play them in the right key on B flat.
Yeah, he didn't know it was an E flat horn on the
yeah. And the Brandenburg. He was trying to play Brandenburg on the B flat trumpet.
And he said that the cat would stay in the practice room all night and he would come back, you know, doing it. But he didn't know that's not necessarily where it's supposed to be done. So that's, again, the kind of same thing that Sean was saying earlier about his particular upbringing. It's all about what you believe you can do, man. But
and Prof was at Mississippi Valley State at the time. Think about that.
Yeah.
This is a black man driving from Mississippi Valley State on Interstate 10
Mm-hmm.
to New Orleans. Think about how many times he could have got killed just from driving.
Telling you, man.
He didn't care, man. He was,
And even back then, he did stints working at different black colleges. He did Mississippi Valley. He was at Tennessee State, Alabama State.
Yeah.
You know, he did the rounds when it comes to giving back. And every time I hear about cats trying to go into teaching now, Prof again serves as an example to me of what you're supposed to do as a teacher. You go where it's needed. You don't go where it's the biggest benefit to you. If your teaching career is benefiting you, then you're probably doing it wrong. You never hear of a person working at a soup kitchen for a salary, but that's what we're doing, man. We're feeding cats as educators. And so, anytime I hear a cat, these really super prestigious, teachings, I'm like, that's amazing. Who are you serving when it's all said and done, though? Are you teaching? Are you trying to fill a cup that's already full, or are you pouring into an empty glass? Because that's supposed to be the job.
Man, is this the same Melvin I went to grad school with?
Well, I still got
books,
whiskey.
Man.
whiskey and some glasses will change it.
I love it, man.
What did you guys learn from each other? Like, Mel, what was your impression of Sean when you guys first met?
What's funny about that? I don't know how much of this.
You gonna tell the story?
I don't know if I can tell it like straight out, like you got to bleep me out here and there. But like Lee and I had just met. Lee Hogan's the other trumpet player. We had just met like a month or two before we went to Rutgers. So we got very close very quickly. Then while we were moving into the dorms at Rutgers, Lee and I were just walking back to the dorm from the main campus, and a cat drives by in an old Beretta and then backs up and looks at us. He says, y'all look like trumpet players. And that was it. That's how we met. And we were right, we were tight as rice from that day forward. We used to go out on the back of the dorm and play towards the highways and jam because it was like a noise thing. Lee and Sean both had weird roommate situations the first year.
Oh my God.
Really strange cultural like clashes. And so the second year of study, we got a place together, and it was like family, man. That's how our place was to hang. And what it showed me, man, like the people that would come over, I think there was a certain level of amazement that we didn't catch on to, because we were just hanging out, we were just playing. It was no way to kind of put a speedometer on how fast we were moving through what should be development, like postgraduate. But that's what happened with us living together. And it's when you find out, you learn about 30% of everything you need in school. That other 70% happens when you leave school. So these after hours, I was living with my lessons. These cats don't know, like, from everything from how we treat each other to how we treat the gigs. And it was cool living with other cats that understood what it's like to be in school and like gig at the same time. Back then, the scene was a lot more fertile, even before COVID. This is like pre 9/11 and right after 9/11, and then the years preceding that, when things started to come back, the scene was very fertile for guys that were versatile. So we were trading off party band gigs, big band hits, sextet, septet, and be like, yeah, man, you hitting this weekend? It's like, nah, man, what's up? Well, I need a sub down here in Atlantic City. If you could do it, man, it's cool. And it was just the family. Like, we had our own little union in the house. So I think that's where I learned how to deal properly with other musicians, because if you respect them, if you really kind of, if you kind of give a fuck about them, you'll do things differently. So, that's what I appreciate about these brothers. And we're still tight like that now, even with distance.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, now that I think of it, I'm trying not to get emotional with it, because we had a specific kind of a blessing at the time in each other. Like, we all had very, very different skills. Like, I came from a classical background, like classical pedagogy. Melvin came with this vast knowledge of like what it was like to play horn lines and what it was like to do those kind of things.
Yeah.
Lee came with a certain level of harmonic sophistication that
was insane.
neither one of us had.
It was insane. Like, Lee was on another level.
Yeah, I mean, he could hear everything. I mean, deep. Like, in fact, like towards the end when we were living together, I was on my way out, but Lee literally all day, every day would be writing music all day.
And recording in his room.
Yeah.
That's when I learned that was even possible. You just hear the windows rattling. Wow.
Yeah.
Or you just hear bass, and he was recording one instrument at a time. He had a snare drum in there one day, just doing that for a couple tracks.
Yeah. But what I got from Melvin was this. Melvin did, for his graduate recital, right? He did an arrangement of a tune from the Nokia song. And I was like, oh.
Oh man, I forgot about that.
Like Melvin kind of helped me to realize, like, music was not just you push and play on the stereo. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just you know, putting on your favorite record or listening to it. Music is literally every sound that you hear in your environment. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget that moment, because it was like, for a minute I was like, oh man, that's corny. Then I was like, no, that's actually brilliant.
I forgot about that, man. The Nokia man, yeah, I'm gonna start playing that again.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
You guys ever go to a party and Melvin start bragging about don't go chasing waterfalls?
Oh, all the time. All the time, man.
Always involved whiskey, man. It was
bro, all the time. But it would be very subtle. It'd be like, yeah, man, when I play, you know, when I
gotta let them know who's in. Don't you know who I think I am?
Hey, we had a group. We had a horn section together.
Oh man,
it was called TBF.
Oh, I can't believe you brought it up.
Excuse the censor. You might have to bleep this out.
Yeah,
you know,
you gotta go and put a box up now.
Yeah, you know, but TBF.
Uh-huh.
You got the F.
Well, I don't know if you do.
No, it could be TBMF.
Yeah, that's what it should have been. Yeah.
Very good. I got it, man.
You got it? Okay, I'm gonna say it then.
I think so.
You know, at the time, the racial makeup of Mason Gross School of Arts there at Rutgers University, it was diverse, but in that diversity, the subgroups, the racial subgroups, were broken down into really small groups. So essentially, Sean, Lee, and myself were pretty much the only like Black guys there, you know, at the time dealing with the graduate jazz program.
Yep.
So when we were walking around,
we were the only ones in the graduate jazz program. We were the only.
And so when we would walk around campus, that was like our nickname.
Yeah. There were like a few people in the opera program.
And there was Kenneth Mills over in the classical program, I believe.
Yeah, and then there was Chris Brown. He was grad jazz.
Yeah.
That was really it. I mean,
that was it.
Corey Rawls came in later, who was our roommate as well. Great
and Jerome later, and
yeah, they were later. You know, so.
But that first year, what was hilarious about that though, when we would play together as a horn section, the guys announcing it had no idea what that name stood for. So, you know, we were in a full club or bar, and the guy would get on the microphone, probably the only 3 Black people in the club. Put your hands together for our horn section, TBF. Woo! Yeah, it was really a messed up inside joke, but it was but it was factual.
I read that Miles book.
There's inspiration there, bro.
Prof was our Miles book.
Yeah, he was miles ahead.
Wow, man, this is great.
Oh,
but we were very serious. Like we were,
as
much as we had fun, we were extremely serious. All of us graduated either magna cum or summa cum laude.
All summa cum. Yeah.
You know, yeah, it was all we were all
summa cum.
Yeah, summa cum laude. We graduated with honors. It was a deep time. Like it was a very deep historic time at the school.
I don't know what that feels like to graduate with honors.
You gotta bullshit a lot and just show up.
You celebrate with the same thing that took you down in the first place. Whatever the hell that is, that's what graduating with honors.
Oh man, well, this is awesome. Melvin, man, I want to thank you so much for coming in.
Oh man, thank you for inviting me,
Yeah,
brother.
Mel.
My
Thank
brother,
you,
man. It's
man.
so good to hear. Good to see you, man.
Thanks,
You
Melvin.
too, bro.
Hope we see
Yeah.
you real soon, buddy.
Yes, sir. Good times.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Melvin.
All right, brother.
Thank you, man.
Yeah. That was dope, man. That was dope. You bring my man on.
I mean, when you brought up the tears, I thought, man, I've only made one other person cry.
Well, you got there. I had to wipe a little bit
Oh,
away.
oh, did that count?
Yeah, that counts.
All right, I Barbara Walters you, man. That's only the second person that's happened to.
Good.
So we were talking about Winton.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about how you Winton came into your life, and then how did that? I mean, tell that story, and then what did you learn?
Well,
And I'll sign us off at midnight at that point, probably.
long story short is that I met him on the phone for the first time when I was doing a jam session in Columbus, Ohio, and Wes Anderson was there, and I was playing. He held the phone up, and when I left the stage, Wes gave me the phone. The first time I hung up on Winton, actually, I hung up on him because I didn't believe it was him.
Mm-hmm.
And when they called him back, I talked to Winton, and Winton said, "Give me a call when you get to New York, or you ever come to New York." At the time, I'm like, but lo and behold, fate would have it that I would end up at Rutgers, and I had a good friend at the time. Her name was Michelle, and she was like she was on the track team or something, like she was fast as hell, but we were really good friends. And Shell said, you tell me that story about meeting Winton. Did you ever call him? And I was like, nah. She grabbed my phone, and this was before you could lock your phone. So she grabbed my phone, ran. I couldn't catch her. I was like 50 more pounds at the time than I am now. But she grabbed my phone and ran, and she called Winton, and he just happened to pick up. And I grabbed the phone, and Winton's like, "What you doing, man? Come on, you're supposed to call me." So I went to his house right then and there in Manhattan, walked in, and he had a full rhythm section in there. It was Aaron Goldberg, Ali Jackson, and Carlos Henriquez
Wow.
in his living room, getting ready to record House of Tribes. I think it was the House of Tribes record. So we're sitting in there. I sat there for a couple hours just listening to them, and Winton was playing chess. Then I realized I had to get back because I had a performance I had to do. Or actually, no, it was a test. I had to take a test. So I said, "Hey man, I gotta go." He's like, "Well, pull your horn out before you go." So I pulled my horn out. And we start playing back and forth, and he started to tell me how sad I was, basically. It's like, "Man, you need to do this. You sound like everybody else. You need your own thing." Da, 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 da. And I'm like, at that point, I'm like, "Okay, let me go, man. You're just hazing me." But the phone rang. The phone rang. It was Ryan Kaiser. Ryan Kaiser's telling Winton he can't make the summer tour. Ryan suggested 3 trumpet players. I was the third one that he suggested. And then Winton looked at me and said, "Hey, what you doing this summer?" And I was actually playing with Harry Connick Jr. at the time. I ended up playing lead with Harry Connick Jr. for that brief amount of time because things happened. And Winton called Harry and basically was like, "Release him from the gig. He's going to be on my band this summer." And lo and behold, I was on that band. And at the end of the tour, he asked me to be on the band to play lead. And I was like, "Nah, I can't do it, man." I actually said no 3 times before I eventually decided that I was like, "Okay, let me just do this."
Yeah.
And the rest is history. But what I learned from Winton, man, Winton's an incredible trumpet player, of course. Great writer. Obviously one of the greatest to live. But Wynton Marsalis's genius is in his work ethic. I have never seen a human being work that hard up close like that. Never once in my life. I mean, this man I would see him write entire scores, man, like symphonies in 3 weeks. Just all day, all night, grind, raise money. And, you know, he's a true blessing, man. He's a blessing to all of us, you know, regardless of what people would think about his style or what kind of music he plays. He is a blessing, man. You know, great cat.
What kind of things did you learn from him about being a leader?
Have a concept clear, a clear concept about what you want. Create a culture around you. Um, Listen to people.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the main thing that I learned from him about leadership is that it's not going to get done until you do it. You can't wait for somebody else to do it. You either have to do it yourself or empower people to do it.
Yeah.
Like that's leadership. Like you are on the front lines. Like you're not behind everything else and like just pulling strings. No, you are on the front lines. It's you. And he's that way, man.
Yeah. Yeah. What was he like in the section? You ever say anything funny?
He did a lot of funny stuff, like went and he taps ahead of the time. Like if the beat is right here, ding, 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 he'd be like, we're like, man, stop tapping your feet. Like it was, that was the only thing that sucked sitting next to him, man. Like, cause he would tap his feet ahead of the time. And I'm like, God, stop doing it. Also, you know, because he's the band leader, you know, it's kind of hard to play lead under him because the band leader is also the fourth trumpet player.
Right.
That's never the case. You know what I mean? So it's like you want to tell the fourth trumpet player, follow me, but he's the leader of the band. So it's like, how do I deal with this type of thing?
Yeah.
And ultimately, you know, I think that's why Ryan Kaiser fits so well in that band playing leads, because he knows Winton so intimately and how they play it together as a section that it's just a natural fit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing, man. It was a long tenure for you in that band too.
Not too long. 6 years. 6 years is, I mean, it's respectful.
Yeah.
It's long enough to get what I needed out of it. But you know, I gave him a year to get somebody, and we, you know, he's still one of my closest friends. He's like a big brother. I love him to death.
Yeah.
And I'll do anything for him, and I know he'll do anything for me, man. So it's a beautiful relationship. Yeah, but 6 years, it seemed longer than that, but it's a really encapsulated time period for me.
Right. Man, that's amazing. And yeah, we're so lucky that we're around when he's around, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. No matter whether you know him intimately or not, I mean, everybody that's felt his influence should feel lucky about that.
Yeah, the music and the trumpet is better because of him.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Another thing I want to talk to you about was the 2011 tribute to Miles tour. How did that come about? And then, like, was that one of those things you were like, am I getting paid for this?
Well, yeah, that, but it came about because I joined Marcus Miller's band to do his Tutu Revisited tour.
Yeah.
And I was actually taking over for Christian Scott, who went on to do more of his thing. And he called me to do that. And I ended up in Marcus's band long term because of that. And right as interesting as right while I was thinking about leaving the band to do other things, this particular tour happened.
Yeah.
And it was a true honor, man, to be in that band. And it was one of the coolest things was that, like, literally on the third gig, I was like, because it was kind of floaty, man.
Yeah.
Like those cats are so out there, like in a good way.
Yeah.
But I felt that it needed direction at times. So I started to direct more, like the melodies and things like that. And one particular night I said, man, I'm sorry. I told Herbie, I was like, I'm sorry if it felt like I was trying to interjecting things. And they all told me, Wayne, Herbie, and Marcus told me in that moment, it's like, man, why do you think we hired you? Like, lead us. And at that moment in time, something clicked in my head, and I realized that I have to step into more leadership roles. And from that moment, any leadership role that has come to me, I haven't turned down. Like from, president of Gen to running this program here, it was literally that moment that changed my life. It's like, this is what I have to do.
Wow.
I figure if they trust me, then I can get a dean to trust me.
I mean, historically with that tour, I mean, what kind of things were there any anecdotes or stories that came up with those guys talking about Miles in that period? I'm sure. I mean, there had to have been all the
Yeah,
time.
it was one of the stories I'll never forget is how Miles would take any song and just basically orchestrate it in such a way that the song comes to life. It's like people would they would bring in seeds to Miles, and Miles would water the seed, put the light on it, and then you have this beautiful flower.
Yeah.
And he would talk. I remember Wayne and Herbie talking about the tune 81 and how when Ron Carter brought it in, it was this one thing that was very simple. But after Miles got it, it turned into this majestic tune that just had so many possibilities in it. And so it was basically the idea and notion of what's possible.
Yeah.
And if it comes to your mind, it's possible. In fact, one of the most important parts of that tour was when Wayne Shorter told Marcus Miller after Marcus and I asked him and said, Wayne, what would you say is the most important thing in the world? And without hesitation, Wayne Shorter said imagination. That's all we got. I was like, love, family, but he's like, you can't appreciate any of that stuff without an imagination. And I'm like, wow.
Well, we're done here now. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Man, that's that's amazing, man. And man, we went through a lot of that stuff early. I got a list of these questions here, but yeah,
It's all good. I hit it, man. But this thing right here, man, it's I got a love-hate relationship with it. And we all do. You know what I mean? But ultimately, if it wasn't for this thing, man, I would be a shell of a human being. You're talking to somebody whose father left when I was 5 years old. You're talking about somebody who grew up without a lot of finances. My parents didn't have a lot. My mother didn't have a lot. I saw a lot of crazy stuff growing up, man. And this thing, along with the universe, whoever is spinning the wheels, put us together here in this moment, man, to talk about the lives we've led. And it's really phenomenal, man, to even know you and to call you friend.
likewise, man.
And to share this painful existence together.
I mean, I'm not done with the questions, but I will say if you feel like it at any point and you want to play that thing, nobody's going to object.
Oh, man, I don't need to play shit.
Man, so imagination is a good segue to this last bit of questions, and then if you feel like playing something, I mean, I'm not going to get upset. But so let's go back to the education a little bit more, right? So talk about I mean you're at Peabody now, you were at Berkeley before. We're kind of going to walk backwards on this. How did you've been growing this program at Peabody?
Yeah.
When you got this opportunity, what did you see the vision as in your mind that made you know that this was the right place and how you were going to do it? What was your plan?
Well, there are a few things. One, as much as I love Berkeley, it's really hard to put your own personal stamp on something at Berkeley without the Berkeley brand. So, although I love the job, I still love Berkeley, man. It's an amazing place. I still say it's the preeminent school for modern music. But there are a few things that took me to Peabody. One, the jazz program was in jeopardy of not existing. And Peabody being the oldest conservatory of music in the country, what would it say about music education in the United States of America if the oldest conservatory didn't have a jazz program? It would be absolutely horrendous for culture. Number two, I didn't necessarily like Boston so much, to be honest with you. It's not one of my favorite places to live because it's so cold and it's so dark all the time that and I like Baltimore as a city. It reminds me of the city I grew up in, the town I grew up in, Warren, Ohio. It's just gritty, good salt of the earth people.
Yeah.
And also, they pretty much told me I had a clean slate to create whatever I wanted to create. And I always imagined having a jazz program that was in two parts, basically like an associate's degree and then a bachelor's degree. So the two parts are 2 years of foundation. And then 2 years, we literally focus on you. What do you want to do with your career? What type of music do you want to make? And each student will be able to graduate with an album, like I call it a sonic portfolio, but this is you. This is what you want to put out in the world. And it's a true honor to be able to do this, man. And honestly, I wanted to see if I was worth my salt, man. I wanted to see if I could do it. 20 years into higher academia, I wanted to see if I had the energy and the will to be able to create a program from nothing. And we're doing well. So I'm thankful.
Oh man, I mean, it's grown. I mean, so much. And that's obviously a tribute to you and all your energy and everything about you that you bring to the table with them.
It's an honor.
And talk about. I mean, there's two other education questions I have. Well, we'll see how that goes. One of them has to do with your clinic work. You go out to a lot of schools, you see programs, and obviously there's way less jazz in public schools than there was when we were growing up, right? You see high school bands without stage bands or big band or clinic, or a small group. But when you go out and do these clinics, either with a big band or a small group, are there anything that you constantly see that always needs to be addressed? Is there a common trait?
Yeah. I think the students need to believe in their own worth in the world, that their voice is important. That's the number one thing. Like, they're individuals. They have a voice, they have creativity. And one of the questions I love the most, I ask this question, I say, how many people in the past few months have heard a song in their head and didn't write it out? Always, every single hand goes up. Every single hand.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, like, these folks are in music school and there are songs that come to them that they don't write out. Imagine if when the song Happy Birthday was supposed to be born, that whoever heard it was like, that's whack. I'm not happy birthday. Then we wouldn't have Happy Birthday. So imagine how many happy birthdays have not been written. And I tell them that all the time. I'm like, you have to believe that your contribution to this world is significant enough to follow through on your own ideas. So that's the number one thing that I try to share and express. And you could see them because they're all kind of like this.
Yeah.
When you get up there, you teach, and I literally do my best to pull out keys and just unlock the chains.
That's beautiful. Actually, I've never thought about any of it like that.
Yeah.
I just say, do you know your chromatic scale? And that seems like to be where the thing starts. Yeah. I know G flat second, buddy. And all right. So the last little bit. If you were in charge of public schools, what changes would you see in the training of teachers? And what would you want to see in the actual schools themselves change? You could do whatever you do.
Well, the first thing I do is eliminate all standardized testing. That's the first thing that will go.
Yeah.
All standardized testing is going away. And then after that, I would pretty much, a lot of the subjects we teach are cool, but I would ask students more questions than I would teach at them. And I would also create a situation where at least half of the day they're creating something. At least half of the day. So one part of the day, you're learning your reading, writing, arithmetic, whatever it is. STEM is the thing now. Excuse me, STEAM is the thing now, right?
Counting to 3, those kind of things.
What's that?
Counting to 3.
Yeah, well, STEAM is science, technology, engineering, the arts, and math.
Yeah, I mean the
So
math.
it's like four, it's like four letters are geared towards engineering, right? And then you throw in the arts, which is also geared towards engineering because you have to create, right? So when you have four of those letters getting the bulk of the time and only one letter being like a throwaway thing, then the creativity is gone. The creativity is why we have buildings. That's why we have roads and bridges, and we have the internet, and we have weird sandwiches with all kind of meats and shit on it. You know, it's creativity that we need to foster more in our children. Then we would have better bridges. We would have better buildings. And the people that are in those bridges, driving across those bridges and in those buildings, could work together better because they're always in the thought of like, let's create something new. Let's create. So that's what I would do. Those two things: get rid of standardized testing, and at least have half of the day be geared towards creativity.
Man. All right. So when do you start your campaign?
Hey man, the only thing I'm running for is to be Phoebe's dad and Malika's dad.
Amen. That's as good as you can do right there. That's
Yep,
what you can do.
that's my focus.
Man, Sean, this has been amazing to talk to you, man. It's like, I mean, I feel like we've known each other for 10 years and then we've known each other for, you know,
Yeah. Well, the good thing is we still got a lot of life left, brothers. So let's make it work.
that's
Let's
exactly
keep.
right. Hey, man, look, hang on a second. And man, thanks everybody that watches. I hope you watch this video more than once. Even though I can't stand to hear myself talk, I'm going to watch it more than once.
Love you, bro. Thank you, man.
Like you, man. Likewise, man. Love you too. And thanks everybody that watched. Thanks for my sponsors. And I'll see you all soon.